Good morning. Welcome to the final panel session of the West 2019. I'm Bill Hamblett from the Naval Institute, Editor-in-Chief of Proceedings. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce our moderator for the panel, Rear Admiral Mike Manazir, U.S. Navy retired and Vice President of Naval Systems at the Boeing Company. Admiral Manazir joined the Boeing Company after retiring from 36 years of distinguished service in the United States Navy. He commanded Fighter Squadron 31, the USS Sacramento, the USS Nimitz, Carrier Strike Group 8 on board USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. His service included 15 overseas deployments from both coasts, 3,750 flight hours qualified in the F-14A and D and the F-18E and F. He has over 1,200 carrier-arrested landings, 5 tours in the Pentagon. Sorry about that, sir. 4 of these in Navy requirements, culminating in his role as the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Warfighting Systems, OPNAV N9. Admiral Manazir, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bill. When you start out getting applauded by your own panelists, you know you're starting good, but they're also shooting at us over here, so I'm going to be careful. Well, welcome to what truly is, I believe, the penultimate event of West. And we feel very lucky to go kind of in this position because the week has been along the lines of the theme of this panel. So for West, sharpening the competitive edge, are we ready to compete, deter, and win globally? You know, actually, ladies and gentlemen, as you write that question, well, it's no. So we can kind of go home. But we've got to figure out a way to do this. So our panel, some key words. How do we accelerate and embrace the rapid adoption of new technology? So just assume that technology is racing away from us at an ever-increasing pace. And what's unique to me as a longtime Pentagon guy is that the line between commerciality and defense is really blurred. And so things that can be used in the commercial world, particularly when you get into autonomy, machine learning, AI, things that Facebook and Google would find revenue producing for them, also have warfighting applications. And so how do we combine the best of the nation's industrial base and go after this? But I'm joined by 4 experts, and the neat thing about being the moderator is I just sit here and introduce them and let them do their great thing. And so what I'd like to do today is to give a short bio, have each one make a couple of comments. We'll move down the line, and after General Wortman is done, if you all aren't racing to the microphones, then I'll throw a softball at one of them to start the conversation, and then we'll watch you race to the microphones from there. So Vice Admiral Winter is an old friend of mine, came out of the acquisition world. He is a career naval aviator with 35 years of active duty experience. Flag leadership tours include Commander of Naval Weapons Division China Lake, Department of the Navy's Unmanned Combat Aviation Acquisition Executive Officer, PEO-UNW, and our 24th Chief of Naval Research. As you probably know, unless you've been hiding under a rock, he currently serves as Program Executive Officer for the F-35 Lightning II Joint Program Office, or F-35 JPO, the Department of Defense's largest acquisition exercise. So Matt, please.
Thanks. Thanks, Nasty. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to be here on the panel with my esteemed colleagues to share my thoughts on the barriers and opportunities on best to accelerate and embrace new technology into large weapon systems. And it shouldn't be a surprise, I'm going to use the F-35 Enterprise as my optic. I see 2 main levers to truly embrace and accelerate technology, and not just to the warfighter, but into all of our elements of the acquisition system. And that's technical matching to the requirement. You know, the technology has to meet to the requirement. And then the business elements, the financing, contracting, and compliancy, the belt sander when we hit things, that slows down that acceleration of technology into our warfighters' capabilities and their hands. So I'm going to touch upon a couple of the initiatives that we're working on in F-35. We actually have hundreds of initiatives that tackle both of those levers, broken out across our 3 lines of effort of development, production, and sustainment, looking at warfighting capability and business practices to make our production lines more efficient, while also getting capability, the new technologies in our warfighters' hands. The one I want to touch upon just to highlight, and then I'll take your questions in the Q&A session, is our continuous capability development and delivery methodology, a true shift in the way the department does at scale for large weapon systems. Understanding that our Block 3F warfighting capability in the F-35 air system is a formidable capability. However, we got to continue to pace the threat for our warfighter and continue to bring it affordably to him and her. So about a year and a half ago, we rolled out this C2D2, continuous capability construct. And we needed to tackle 4 main pillars. One was we really needed to get to model-based systems engineering. We really needed to get to true capability-based testing. We needed to pull out the compliancy of contracting and be more agile. And we had to figure out how to better estimate the resources to actually do agile-based software and hardware delivery at speed, at scale for our warfighter. We are in a run, sprint, accelerate. I don't crawl. I haven't done that for about 51 years. Crawl, walk, run gives our workforce an opportunity to go slow. We need to keep that sense of urgency in that business line of effort and the technology matched to requirements. The F-35 air system is not just an airplane. We have software in that airplane called an operational flight program. But we also, under the umbrella of this program office, we have the responsibility to develop, deliver, and sustain the intelligence systems, the maintenance systems, the planning systems, and the training systems that brings coupled together that warfighting capability to our U.S. services and international partners. We need to be able to bring and break down those barriers that allows us to truly move at speed and truly embrace when we see a new technology, be able to integrate it measured in days and weeks, not the current years and decades. It's taken 2 decades to get where we are with the F-35, and I'll be more than happy to take questions on the history and the albatross of yesterday, but we're looking forward. And with C2D2, we're already experiencing and demonstrating in our OFPs for inside the aircraft, delivering those at 2 to 4 week intervals. 2 to 4 week intervals with new updated corrections and, for the first time in April, new capability to our warfighter. We have project pilots on the maintenance systems to truly determine the best way to do agile software development. The biggest barrier I have there is not the technology and the skill set of the people. It's the cultural drag and barrier to doing something different. Doing something different takes time. And so we're championing through our C2D2 methodology a shift in culture, not just in government, this is industry too. It's a combined partnership to truly deliver warfighting capability as defined by our warfighter to match that requirement to the technologies. And we're going to be able to bring on electronic warfare, avionics, fiber optic technologies, advanced propulsion technologies for better performance of the aircraft, better algorithmic phenomenologies and computing powers for our maintenance systems, our training systems, our planning systems. And we're already experiencing that. Because we've put together some of the contract elements that allow us to get the yes of the idea and the resources to the performer, not measured in years, but literally measured in days and weeks. And I'll give you a couple of examples as we go forward in the questions and answers. But back to the embracing and accelerating technology, in the F-35 domain, we've established 3 major thrusts to ensure that we can really reap and benefit and harvest from small and medium businesses and encourage our large businesses and our primes to do the same. We embrace the SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR programs and investments. F-35 invests between $40 and $60 million a year in phase 1 through phase 3s. If you're interested and you don't have part of that, you need to come see me. The second thrust is our own internal F-35 program S&T outreach days. We do those twice a year. We get about 20 to 30 companies that come to Crystal City in Washington, D.C. We lay out our what we call near-term challenges. thermal management, artificial intelligence, big data analytics, additive manufacturing, those types of things, and we ask for solution space. And then we get into either the cyber world or into what I'm going to, the third element, leveraging off the United States Air Force authorities. I can go any way I want. I'm an OSD program and find the best and brightest and best performers, not only technology, but in the business. We are going to leverage off the Air Force's what they call pitch day. So in May, I'm going to lay out the number of immediate, not near-term requirements, immediate requirements that I want startups and small businesses to help me with. In June, I'm going to have those folks come and give me that list, and in July, I'm going to pick 20. And those 20 are going to come in, they're going to pitch it, I'm going to give them a contract that day, and the contract length is going to be 1 page. And I'm going to give them money the same day, and they're going to go work on that immediate requirement that I need something back. And they're going to have a 30, 60, 90-day deliverable. And we're going to move forward. So that's some of the contracting business activities to match the technologies that continue to be injected into our F-35. Everything from the fusion, algorithmic sensing, to our LO stealth capabilities and the interoperability engagements in the aircraft and our maintenance systems, intelligence systems, and planning systems and training systems. It's a really exciting time. We've embraced the new technology. We're working on those business elements to truly accelerate it, and we need your help to make that happen. Appreciate the introduction time. I look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Vice Admiral J. Donnelly was a career submariner and is both the son and father of submarine officers. He retired in 2010 as Commander Sub 4 and now works for Huntington Ingalls Industries as Corporate Vice President, Advanced Technologies. In his new position created last month, Jay is responsible for strengthening the company's ability to translate innovative ideas and technologies more quickly into operational capabilities for Huntington Ingalls Industries customers. He leads the Advanced Technology Group, which supports experimentation, exercises, and analytic efforts through IRAD across the company. Jay?
Thank you, Admiral. Before I start, I have to say that I think Vice Admiral Winter has the hardest active duty job in all of the Navy, or maybe all of DoD. But I really admire what you're trying to do, Matt. As Admiral Manazir said, this new position I'm in at Huntington Ingalls Industries was stood up last month. And so it's very nascent at this point. My goal is to accelerate the incorporation of technology into the platforms that we build for our customers. Initially, I plan to focus my efforts on the unmanned market, unmanned surface and unmanned undersea vehicles, and try and accelerate the various technologies that will enable those systems to be fielded more quickly. I think it's really all about the people, and it's trying to connect the right individuals in academia, our industry partners, within the government, and within the Navy labs in order to try and move this goal forward. Initially, as of today, I posted a requisition to hire a director that is going to work in an office, Huntington Ingalls office, to provide full-time presence in Newport, Rhode Island. And with the primary goal of working very closely with the Naval Undersea Warfare Center Newport Division, which is right next to the office space that I intend to rent. That is the Navy Center for Development of Unmanned Systems, both primarily undersea unmanned systems. And we want to form partnerships with them, explore the use of cooperative research and development agreements, and to be a part of that effort to try and bring the intellectual power that we have at Huntington Ingalls to bear on solving those problems and getting those systems fielded as quickly as we can.
Thanks, Jay. So Bill Bray has had a long and distinguished career in government service. Since August of 2017, Mr. Bray has served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, Test, and Evaluation, DASN RDT&E. He's responsible for executive oversight of all matters related to RDT&E budget activities, science and engineering, advanced research development, prototyping and experimentation, and test and evaluation. If you don't think that's a mouthful already, he also works for Hondo Gertz, who you heard him talk to yesterday, so he's getting yanked along pretty good. He's also responsible for oversight and stewardship of the Department of the Navy R&D establishment, including all naval laboratories, warfare centers, and systems centers. Previously, Mr. Bray was Executive Director, Program Executive Office for Integrated Warfare Systems, PEO-IWS. Prior to that, he was Director, Integrated Nuclear Weapons Safety and Security, SP-30, in the Navy Strategic Systems Program Office. Bill?
Nasty, thank you. And good morning, everybody. Kind of want to build off Mr. Gertz's comments yesterday. He talked a lot about his strategic objectives. I'm not going to kind of belabor those, but I would like to talk a little bit about how we're getting at those items. So he mentioned deliver and sustain lethal capacity, affordability, agility. How do you develop the workforce? My office at DAS and RDT&E, we've been in the middle of a lot of those efforts, and many times he'll talk about how we're going to get there, and he talks about his 4 Ds. Those Ds really form the foundation of the change that we're trying to make and the tools and policy changes that we're trying to bring to the Department of Navy. So, when you talk about his Ds, one is delegate, differentiate, digitize, and develop. So I want to take each one, talk a little bit about what we're doing in each of those areas, or what we have done. Yesterday, he talked a lot about some of the projects and the programs and the impact that these efforts have had over the last year, and I think it's very, very important. Delegate is one of the areas where we've tried to get to the streamlining of the way we do business. How do we push the authority, the accountability, and the responsibility down to the person that has to make the decisions, and eliminate a lot of the oversight and requirements of pushing paper through the system? Who needs to have that authority? Who's making that decision? Who's making that risk acceptance? So you've seen things that we push from our office of where all the ACAT 2 and 3 programs are now run by the PEOs. Another one that we've done more recently is we've taken advantage. About 3 years ago, Congress gave us authority called Section 804, mid-tier acquisition. And that one we pushed down again to the PEOs. You have the authority and responsibility. As long as you have the money and the requirement, your resource sponsor aligned, go off and implement the 804, that statute that was put in place. So those are kind of things we've delegated down and put it in the hands of the PEO and the PMs to go make these things happen and eliminate some of that oversight. Differentiate. It's about the tools. Historically, the acquisition community was very focused on a very few ways of doing business and not really looking at all the tools that were available to them to get their job done. So 804 is certainly one of those, the Section 804, the mid-tier acquisition. But we've really spent the last year educating and pushing information out and changing policy on things like other transaction authorities. There's already 8 consortiums that are out there, or about 18 to 20 consortiums that were out there that were available for program managers to go use. And they have started to use those. In addition to that, there's a couple warfare centers and labs that went off and looked and said, hey, we have some gaps where OTA consortiums would make sense, Newark, Newport being one of those, where we've gone out and created an OTA for undersea warfare capabilities. Another one recently was down at SSC Lant, now NIWIC Lant out in Charleston, where they went for information warfare research projects, really trying to tackle that IT digital data analytics piece and use OTAs to the advantage. So, and there may be a few more coming. We're looking at one for aircraft. Pax River is looking at one for aircraft. So very positive movement there. To get those, another one is the CSOs, and we've kind of used the commercial service offerings as a way to kind of bring things forward, tied that to advanced naval technology exercises where we can demonstrate technology. And then price challenges. Price challenges was one of those items that I had really never heard of. Mr. Gertz came on board, said, hey, there's an opportunity to use this thing called price challenges where you can really get crowdsourcing broadly across industry across the whole of government, many places that really get you good answers at a very low cost. So we've taken that one on, we've pushed that authority out, and actually the Marine Corps is really, I think recently, Mark Orsiscom is going to take that one on. Digitize. If we really want to move quickly and move forward, we really have to embrace MOSA, open systems architecture and those standards. I think we've done a very good job in the naval community to do that already. The separation of the hardware to the software, the things that Admiral Winter talked about that they're doing in Joint Strike Fighter. You've seen that in the submarine community with ARCI processes. We've been on that path for a long time. I think we got to figure out how do we take that and scale that? How do we use model-based systems engineering? How do we use that to our advantage to do that integration much quickly, both for the big integration, but also for some of the smaller efforts, the prototypes that come in. We need to take advantage of those, and I think MOSA and model-based systems engineering is a key piece. And then I'll end with develop. Develop is all about the workforce. You know, the last year we've laid a lot of these tools out there. We've done some training for the workforce, but what I really want to be able to do is get out there and really scale that aspect, because I think that getting people to understand and institutionalize these tools as a way of doing business, I think is the key that we really start getting at this moving forward. The NRD&E is a key workforce for the government, but how do we get the NRD&E, the industry, small, large, medium companies, all those labs that are out there, FFRDCs, UARCs, all working together collaboratively. I think that's the power of where we want to go, the power of the idea and getting it into the systems we need for the warfighter. So with that, Admiral.
Thanks, Bill. I really like the composition of our panel up here, and it's not because it's naval, but because, you know, we have a unique way of looking at process, right? So has anybody seen that advertisement or whatever it is that has the maze? And the good Navy mouse goes through that acquisition maze to try to run around the other side, and the good Marine mouse goes blowing through from one corner to the other side and gets it done. So I'm happy to have Brigadier General Kristen Wortman here. He's the Commanding General of Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. He's the Vice Chief of Naval Research. He's an old hand at this. He did a panel the other day, so he knows what he's doing. He's responsible for supporting the service's future force development and design efforts. The Warfighting Lab has worked extensively to advance the Commandant and the Chief of Naval Operations objective of developing and employing integrated naval forces. Kristen gets it done. Kristen, over to you.
Hey, sir, thank you very much. Appreciate the introduction. And you'll have an opportunity this afternoon to hear from General Neller. And the secret to how we break those walls down is he just throws us into them until they give. And it's a privilege to be part of that team. So I'm going to talk a little bit about best practices for accelerated capability development from our perspective, obviously. But you know, the first thing is really start the conversation away from requirements and acquisition. And you know, start with a study of the adversary. We live in a time where we have a sophisticated adversary that's extremely well resourced, and it's a bit of an adapt or die moment for us. And this is where I think we really benefit from the imperative to innovate, the imperative to accelerate that's provided to us by the Commandant, by the CNO, and by our senior civilian leadership inside of the department. I also have to spend a lot of time studying the possibilities of technology. The ground is shifting underneath our feet for how we structure our capabilities and how we conduct our operations. So we have to put in the same room our scientists, our engineers, our operators, and our intel professionals, and really gain an understanding as a team of how we need to structure our capabilities and operations in the context of the threat environment. And that's really where the why comes from. That's really where the imperative comes from for how we have to change. We have a responsibility to educate from the science and technology end of the process through requirements and into the material development or acquisition and procurement. And folks in the business will often talk about managing the valley of death associated with transitioning technology. But if we share a common aim point across each one of those communities and we understand the timing and the sequencing associated with moving towards that aim point, it's much easier to manage those transitions. Next, I would just say that, you know, we have to run a number of activities and responsibilities in parallel as opposed to sort of one after the next. So this business of science and tech and prototype development, live force experimentation, requirements development, and acquisitions, we need to stack those processes to the maximum extent possible on top of one another. And on the front end of the process, on the science and technology and prototyping components of the activities, we need to structure our activities, structure our engagement with industry in a manner that allows acceleration on the back end of the process. And if we're thoughtful about how we do that, when we take the requirement, we take what we think is really promising over to the Systems Command or PEO Land Systems, they're able to move really fast because we've set up the front end of the process smartly in a manner that allows us to access the authorities that Mr. Bray talked about. And finally, we just have to have the money in the program that allows us to pour success into. Quite often when we have success in science and technology, we have success in prototyping, and we think we have an opportunity that provides a lot of leverage for our operating forces, we immediately get into this discussion about reprogramming and where we're going to move money away from so that we can take advantage of that opportunity. So we believe that we need to have some 6.4, 6.5 in procurement dollars built into the program that allows us to exploit successful prototyping efforts. And those are difficult discussions on the Hill because appropriators are reluctant to hand you money that is not spoken for and is not tethered to a specific program. But we found with our rapid prototyping, our rapid capability office, that if we're actively engaged with the appropriators, we're actively engaged on the Hill, they're willing to provide us or afford us some discretion because they also recognize the imperative to adapt quickly. Very much looking forward to the Q&A and appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you this morning.
Thank you, Christian. I think, ladies and gentlemen, the introductory comments have started to surround what we want to talk about today. But we're kind of mired in process, and so let's assume for the discussion today that we are attempting to keep up with the leading edge of technology, that the best of what America can offer can be brought to bear against an adversary that's trying the same thing. So the national power of the defense industrial base, the national industrial base is coming to bear. But as we go forward, you don't want to be second to market. So for the businesses out there, you always want to get there first, and so you don't want to be in second place in a conflict either. So let's assume that we want to take that leading edge of technology. We have lots of process, the DoD 5000, the JSIDS stuff. We have lots of bureaucracy. Our people, staffs are built on trying to keep something bad from happening, and then we all get kind of gummed up. So there are pockets of innovation, though. There are processes like the 804 mid-tier acquisition process, authority from Congress. There are other transactional authorities. And so what I want to do today in our panel time is we've got two microphones right here. And while you were thinking about your questions and to move to the microphones, I'm going to toss a ball in the middle of our four panelists, and I'm going to ask the question. And I would have bound it this way. It's a softball question. Gentlemen, you can leap for the ball and start. But given all of that, is it people or is it process?
I'll take that one. So to me, I think it's process. I think there's a lot of things, and General Wortman kind of articulated one, the whole process of trying to get funding and aligned to programs. I don't think it's people, because when I go out and visit, I was at NIWIC PAC, I was at NSWC Crone, I get out to the labs, I get out to the facilities, I talk to industry. What I see is people yearning to move more quickly and drive capability, not lose discipline, but really use the tools and do things differently and engage with industry and bring those in. So to me, I think the people are ready to do that. There are some of the processes that we have put in place over the many, many years. I think it's time we have to revisit those and lean those, eliminate them, but look at doing things differently, given today's modern world.
I'll add to that. I think it's the people that own the process. So there's an element of people in this. But to Bill's point, my earlier comments about having to look at sort of entrenched verification, validation, and compliancy processes that truly do have value, but in this focus of truly accelerating and doing continuous capability delivery starts to put the drag on that, not just the urgency, but the ability to deliver at speed. And so it's important, you heard Secretary Gertz delegation, right? The 2 time taxes that eliminate the ability to accelerate. When you get a good idea, then you got to get somebody to say yes. And then once somebody says yes, you got to get resources to the performer to start the work. So those 2 time taxes are usually measured in months and years to a milestone decision, and then the contracting and negotiations to get those resources out there. So the better way of being able to bring those down, 1-page contract, single day, authorities given to outside of the normal processes are first order enablers to truly accelerate technology to the hands of our warfighters. Thanks.
I'm glad we got both of those in the way, because I think you've heard the CNO exhort people to go fast. You're allowed to go fast. Sometimes that becomes sort of the organizational piece. Yes, sir.
Hi, Justin Katz, Inside Defense. Admiral Winter, I wanted to ask you to speak more about this rapid contracting plan you have for later this year. Specifically, are you aware of the JPO ever doing something like this before? Are you aware of DoD ever doing something like what you just described before? Could you give us a sense of some of the requirements that you're going to be going after in this time? And lastly, could you give us a sense of the, I guess, size of these contracts or the top line amount of money that you're working with when you are going to be meeting with these contractors? Thank you.
Sure, Justin, thanks. I am, in my 35 years, I'm sure that there were other initiatives, because I will tell you that the very first Navy contract was a single page and said, build me 2 ships. And the Treasury of the United States gave the money, and we built 2 ships. So the answer theoretically to your question is yes, this is done before. Has it been done in the recent past? It's been done in pockets. It's been done in RCO shops. It's been done at research laboratories. It's done at even in other programs and smaller elements. My thrust here is we've got to do it at scale, and it's got to become part of our DNA. This is a leverage off of the United States Air Force Pitch Day, which is going to occur coming later this spring. And the idea there is to focus in functional areas around software first. Ask startup companies to come in and our toughest challenges on software engagement, software development, software delivery, software sustainment. And so that's the area that we're going to look at first. And across the F-35, I call it the 8 elements of the F-35 air system. When I took over the job, we were myopically focused on the airplane because we thought the F-35 was a strike fighter. It's an air system. When the Marine Corps out at Yuma said, I'm not going to fly my F-35Bs because Alice is not good enough, which is our information system for maintenance, it became apparent to me you got to come outside the skin of the aircraft and give the appropriate focus for warfighter readiness on the aircraft with OFP, your reprogramming labs with your intelligence data file, your maintenance systems and the software with its planning systems, and your training systems and your software to run it. So my idea, the pitch day coming this summer, it is looking at the elements within those where I need to be able to better enable those lines to be faster at delivering capability, not necessarily deliver the capability. I'm looking at making my training systems more agile. I want my training systems to lead my warfighting capability. I want to make sure that the OFP and the aircraft can continuously be updated, potentially push it like a cloud. I don't have to give it to the DT and OT crowd. The guys flying their mission automatically have a window that comes up and says, EW module update ready for download, yes or no, as the individual's going into the fight. Some of these things that I get people to laugh at and they say you can never do that because of process, because of things. We've got to start thinking differently. And this pitch day is one of these elements, one of these enablers, one of these opportunities. Will we pitch and swing and miss? Will we pitch and catch and hit? We'll find out. But we've got to do something different. And in the enabling elements of contracting, verification, and compliancy, the technologies and the new things to bring on are plentiful. We just got to get them through that business wicket and into the hands of our warfighter. Thanks.
Sir.
Good morning. Thank you, gentlemen. Frank Kostenko, Booz Allen Hamilton. Got another softball, but I've heard a lot of talk about the people and the processes, and I'm just curious if there's any new initiatives with the nation's reserve force, whether it's Marines, Navy, Army, Coast Guard, and Admiral, I wanted to give you a shout out on the startups, because here in SoCal, that's a big word for incubators and accelerators, and I know the reserves are a pretty broad sector of our workforce. Just want to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
And so I think a couple of the areas that are most prominent for us in terms of how we're tying into intellectual capacity of the reserve forces are at a Defense Innovation Unit, the Marine Corps component of it, builds heavily on the expertise that's resident in the reserve community, and the folks that we have mobilized to serve full-time on that staff, have really impressive academic credentials and background and really impressive reach into to industry and understanding how to bring things together across government, academia, and industry. Probably the other area is inside of the lab and our ability to get to some of the expertise that's not resident on our active component or GS team. And to be able to, with our individual mobilization augmentee or our IMA detachments, to be able to bring some of the expertise that we need as we execute our annual focus years. This year happens to be information warfare, so you can imagine we're drawing very heavily on the reserve component to help to inform some of those activities and our understanding of the possibilities. And then finally, within the Marine Forces Reserve, the 4th Marine Logistics Group has had a very active program to identify all of the Marines assigned to the MLG that have advanced degrees or positions of real opportunity in industry that the Marine Corps ought to be more deliberately taken advantage of because of the unique assets associated with those Marines. So those are kind of some of the things that we're doing that are starting to mature and starting to bear some fruit for us. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll go Bill with you and then move to the center.
So historically, one of the problems with fielding capabilities quickly has been mission creep or requirements creep. So with our adversaries moving so quickly, fielding new capabilities, new technologies, new weapon systems and platforms as quickly as they are, particularly the Chinese, how do you avoid mission creep impacting the ability to field capability quickly?
So, Goat, great question. So, we've got to stop looking at this traditionally and saying, I've got a baseline that I'm going to develop to and deliver 7 years from now. The C2D2 methodology goes to the heart of that establishes the labs and the facilities and the skill sets, the processes and procedures of coding and hardware integration and delivery in severable chunks. And it doesn't matter if you're delivering bread baskets or EW receivers or next generation stealth updates. So that when the threat changes and our warfighter needs requirements creep, right? Not desirements, but true requirements. The acquisition support enterprise is agile enough to be able to bring that EW sensor that needs to come forward and get out to the warfighter because that threat sector has emerged as a higher priority than combat ID or other capabilities that we're currently coding. C2D2 gives us that framework to be able to do that. I will tell you that I'm okay with my warfighter continuously pressurizing and being a demanding customer and bringing those requirements to bear. We've got to have that. But we have a responsibility to be able to respond to those requirements and objectively show how we can provide those highest priority capabilities back to them in an affordable, timely manner. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could add on that as well, what we've found, and there's a number of good programs out there today, in addition to what Admiral Winter is doing, that I think have gone down this road. And whether it's Aegis virtualization, the compiled combat 24-hour efforts that are ongoing, and I mentioned earlier the Archie-Swiftist model. Part of it, there's a couple key tenets that I think make those success. The threat and being responsive to the threat. 2, being able to get the capability that the warfighter needs out there in a very speedy time, so the warfighter has actually seen responsiveness to the threat, right? A lot of times our big programs, oh yeah, we got that threat, we know about it, in 5 years we'll deliver that capability. That's just unsat, the way things are moving. So key to that, in my mind, is understanding the threat capability, getting the warfighter in the room with the developer, with the scientist engineers, figure out how to solve the problem, and then insert it as quickly as possible, and set yourself up for sprints, right? So what's in the job jar? Don't over-pressurize the job jar, but get what you can get done and push it out there and get it to the warfighter to use. You can perfect it over time. But I think getting the capability, at least an 80% capability, is much better than a 0 capability in 5 years. A lot of times in the past, we have not looked at time as a key element. I think we have to bring that time in, and I think that's where that sprint perspective and be able to go quickly. Because if you can do it in 90 days, you'll be able to do the next upgrade, 180 days. Now you're starting to get that capability drop. The warfighter can see the capability in the jobs they're doing out in the field. And I think that perspective is a key change element we have to get to.
I think it's a very valuable point to consider that titanium tube that's called a program of record. And once it starts with requirements down here and you're trying to get to the other side, how do you put technology in to that titanium tube without somebody saying, wait a second, you're changing the contract, you're changing everything. So I think that the discussion is a good one for all of us to consider, that you have to change the way in which we contract to accommodate stuff like Admiral Winter and Mr. Bray are talking about. So how do you change the program of record definition to keep up with the leading edge of technology, particularly when you're thinking about things that are software-driven, integrated live, virtual, constructive, where one piece comes in that's better than a module or something. You want to bring that in without getting accused of requirements creep or mission creep from both the incumbent that has the contract, and they worked really hard to get it, and Congress that says, wait a second, we didn't approve that. And so how do we change that stuff? Yes, sir.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Captain Yuri Sip. I'm a Marine Corps Communications Officer, and my question actually follows directly on your comments, sir. I work in a billet that requires a familiarity with the acquisitions process. We go to Defense Acquisitions University, the milestones, the tasks, the subtasks, the horse blanket. Do you gentlemen foresee any revamping of the defense acquisitions process, or just minor tweaks, or are we going to start hitting the certain wickets with electronic models like Admiral Winter mentioned?
I personally believe a lot of the tools already exist for us to go do this. I think it's a matter of changing the way we acquire things for a lot of the things, the discussion topics we've already had. A lot of the tools that we've tried to expose to program managers over the last year, they've been in existence. Many of them have been for decades. It's just, program managers perhaps weren't aware, didn't know about them. I think the big change that we've had is the way we are building our systems and that open architecture aspect, making a modular, doing things in the software space where now we can do that, true agile, where you have all the players in the room all at the same time, the tester, the safety compliance, the warfighter, and so, the engineering V, typically it would take us 5-6 years to get through that discipline process. In my mind, you're doing that every day. You're bringing the requirements in from the warfighter, you're changing the software, you're delivering the software, you're testing it, and you're done on that day. So to me, I don't think we need any, new authorities. I think it's changing the way we do things. I think items like the RCO, the way we've done advanced naval technology exercises, where we're really bringing all that together. I think that's changing the way we do business, and then using the authorities appropriately in the right spaces.
Sir.
Mike Mann. So I remember way back when the original vision for the F-35 was design to price, design to schedule. And I'm sure nobody woke up and said we want to take over 25 years to field the capability. And I'm looking forward, I'm not looking back, but I'm really interested to hear what your takeaways are on the key lessons learned to keep that from happening as we go forward in the next aviation programs, aircraft programs.
I'm sure that, Mike, that's not directed to Jim over here. I'll take that one. However, I will say that this is a combined industry, government lessons learned path here. Fortunately or unfortunately, Lieutenant Commander Winter was on the F-35 program from 1997, May 05, with Lieutenant Colonel Gertz, who's now the SAE for Navy, in the program office. And so I have some firsthand knowledge of the strategy and framework and the intention and the objectives. One of the root causes that this admiral will tell you unapologetically is that we attempted to do what's called total system performance responsibility to our industry base, TSPR, which on the onset of the SDD contract. That was great in principle and theory. As we look at it over the long term, it became a battleground of data rights and data products and activities that we continue to struggle with today. So I spent a lot of executive bandwidth and a lot of energy in that domain. So one thing is make sure that you have a true understanding and project yourself to the life end of your project and do vignettes. And that's what I have my team do when we do contracting. We think about the end in mind, not just trying to get something out the door. Second, I have 3 ACAT 1 scope in dollar amounts focused on modifying current aircraft to bring them up to the final configuration of Block 3. And that was a deliberate decision by our enterprise, appropriately so from a warfighting perspective, to start delivering aircraft and air systems before complete verification of the design, qualification of the design, and understanding of the design. So those two are lessons learned from an acquisition perspective. The next is from a warfighter's perspective. I will tell you that the commonality of the 3 variants, though from a production perspective, when you look at the parts list, it's not at the volume we wanted. The commonality is there. The way we take off and land these 3 different variants is really the only difference. When they're up and away, and we're seeing this in combat, not just exercises, the interoperability and the ability of this system to truly engage in the fight, engage together, talk to submarines, to satellites, and everything in between, and provide the lethality and the effectiveness, the awareness for everything in that battle space is unquestioned. So where we are today is why we need to continue to look forward. I've written a number of these lessons learned down, Mike, and we've provided it to those that need, but it's unclassified. We can share that with you. Thanks.
Sam, before I go to you, Jay, I'm intrigued by your new position, and a large capital company like Huntington Ingalls would put a seasoned executive in a place that's looking forward. To the point that Mike made with cost and schedule challenges, can you give your perspective from a big industry, a big company perspective to kind of that question about cost and schedule going forward?
Yeah, well, it's a constant challenge, especially in the platforms my company builds. They take 5, 6, 7 years to put together, and that's 3 generations of Moore's Law. So you have to have the flexibility, I think, in the combat systems for ships to do a tech refresh near the end of the construction period. We've done that in the submarine force reasonably well, I think, with the acoustic rapid COTS insertion program. And I think we need to do better in some of the surface platforms and the carriers that we build. just because of the duration of the construction program, you don't want to have to rip everything out that was contracted for and replace it during a post-shakedown availability. That's a constant, it's a constant tension within the way we currently do our acquisitions.
Yeah, I think for those of us who are in industry in the audience, and then for those in uniform, we can't just go to the DoD and go, hey, you guys need to change so we can go faster. There's going to be some kind of a synergistic approach to this, and it'd be helpful if industry and defense are in the room at the same time as you're creating these requirements to go after exactly that. What's the outcome supposed to look like? Good, Sam?
Hi, Sam Legren with USNI News. When the warfighter is generating the requirements, I mean, this is mostly a process question. So rapid acquisition depends on warfighters generating the requirements, and that gets to, you know, the folks who make these decisions. I mean, what is the process for that? So I'm not going to, back at Surface Navy Association this year, there was a smart senior chief got to the microphone when there was a similar panel, and it was just like, well, how do I get this to you? And a program manager was just like, well, send it to me via email. Here's my email address. So, I mean, it sounds like that there's this push to democratize the requirements a little bit to the warfighters downrange. However, what's the process for that? And then once you get those requirements, and if you're talking about moving things as like an iPhone update, right, and maybe with outside of the rigors of the JROC process and, you know, DOT&E review, what do you have a guarantee for as far as quality assurance? You know, so if you're going to push it like an iPhone patch, who's your QA team, and who are they accountable to? So, thank you.
So, Bill, first you, and then, or Kristen, you go first, but I was going to have you two guys answer from your perspective, so however you want to do it.
Yeah, great question, and I appreciate it. It sounds like a process question in many respects. I think it's a people question. You know, nobody's voice carries in the National Capital Region like our operating forces. And frankly, we try to use our system to cheat the system a little bit. And the way that we do that is we take our prototypes and we insert it into live force experimentation with the expectation that when we have success, it's going to be that operating force voice that pushes headquarters Marine Corps towards fielding that capability. The other piece that we do, and this, you know, is it people or is it process? You know, the folks who are working science and technology, the folks that are working prototyping, have to work back to the operating forces and make them aware of the possibilities. You know, as a guy who grew up in the infantry and kind of trapped within the operating forces on, you know, what's going on within the Marine Air Ground Task Force or the MAGTF, I didn't spend a lot of time imagining where we might be in 3 or 5 years, and I could have helped the system be more responsive by exercising my voice back to the service headquarters and the folks who were dialed in on solving the problems or meeting the challenges that we're having there in the operating forces. So we push quite often to make sure that there's awareness out in the operating forces of the possibilities of technology so that they can ask us to deliver that for them. And in the same time, during the course of that discussion, they're helping us to understand and to confirm or to refine whether or not we're aligned to their toughest challenges. And if we get those components right, we set conditions for the system or the process to produce for us.
Yeah, and what Kristen says is spot on. To me, we're not talking about necessarily changing the requirements process. A lot of that, we're going to build an aircraft carrier in a traditional way we've done aircraft carriers, right? We'll look for efficiencies, move quickly. It's, to me, when you're starting to talk about that capability that you're trying to drive, and some of it can be just adjustments in the current requirement that exists today. But in order to understand that, I think, again, you start with what is the problem the warfighter is trying to deal with? Get them in the room with those science and technologies to prototype. And part of prototyping is not just, hey, let's get what widget we can. Part of prototyping is understand what is the requirement we're really going after. Do we understand that? How do we refine that? And so being able to bring and look at the ConOps. You know, what ConOps was it going to be used under? Do the ConOps have to adjust? So getting that early look right in front and then being able to kind of work that through, put it out in the real field, in a real event, in a real world environment to see how does the prototype work, you learn a lot. Once you're able to build the prototype, That's when I think you start getting into, okay, how do you scale this into the broader programs of record? How does that build into meeting the broader requirement? That's where authorities like 804 and 806, the mid-tier acquisition agility, allows you to come in and say, I want to take this piece, this block, this key aspect of software, and I'm going to bring it in and integrate it into the broader platform or system that I'm bringing in. So to me, I'm not sure it's a requirements process change, but I think it's the way we do business and bringing the right people together right up front.
Good. Yes, sir. Sorry to keep you standing so long.
No problem. Steve Alonzo, Marine Electric Systems. Thank you, gentlemen. I've been around for 42 years. I continually hear lip service played to life cycle cost. Part of the problem we have with budgets are we pay huge amounts of sustainment because of bad acquisition decisions made at the beginning of systems. And so much like the big national debt, we keep growing that back-end problem, so we have less money for new systems. And I hear rapid innovation, but much like I've never seen anybody dealt with for saving an acquisition dollar that costs $4 in sustainment later. How are we going to address the problem of tying acquisition and sustainment in this rapid innovation environment? How do you plan to do that?
Go ahead, brother.
So the model of when you have a baby, very demanding, resources, got to be very attentive. Through the 20s, 30s, and 40s of that life, they're independent, not a lot of cost. And then when they get old, you got to get back on that train of taking care of them and paying a lot of money. I use that example for any weapon system. It's not just about the sustainment costs. It's about making sure that you understand that total life cycle timeline. F-35 was given the mandate to be a total ownership, total capability framework. That's why everybody calls us the most expensive acquisition program in the Department of Defense, because we roll in the sustainment costs of all F-35 aircraft, the intelligence systems, the maintenance systems, the planning systems, the training systems, all of that, to 2077, right? So when you look at that, we have a great opportunity to understand how we can drive down those sustainment costs. It's a shared responsibility in the actual material solution and in our warfighters' desire and organizational construct on how they want to operate and maintain that material solution. There have been books upon books and initiatives upon initiatives. There is no specific answer to this, Steve. We can't sit there and say, here's the magic process or the magic activity. What it takes is consistent, focused leadership and understanding of the system at hand and bringing the best and brightest from industry and the government to put that plan together that targets those sustainment driving costs. I'm on a quest right now, we all are, for 80% MC for strike fighters across the department. Along with that is the ownership costs in cost per flying hour and cost per tail per year. My number one driver is not the way my Marines and aviators and Navy operates. It's the ability for the supply chain to put parts in the bin so that my maintainer has a spare part when that plane is broken. That's going to change over time. 20 years from, actually 5 or 7 years from now, that's not going to be the sustainment driver. So we can't stay focused on a particular area. We have to think of it broadly, and we have to understand our weapon system sustainment environment to keep those costs down. Those are my thoughts. Thanks, Steve.
I think as well, the system that we have of funding is in the way sometimes. And people will try to moderate that funding or say, hey, I can spend $1 later on. That's O&S cost down the pike here. So right now I'm only worried about APN 1, for instance. Budgeting, some of that has to change as well. It's a good question.
Yeah, if I could add on that one a little bit too. I think Admiral Donnelly's point of trying to build in the thought of upgrading combat systems right up front when the ship or a platform is built, I think is a key piece, because often we don't do that, and then that combat system, which is based on processors that are changing at the every day, right? IT, digital is changing every day. Then we got to figure out how to upgrade that to deal with the threats that are out there. So building those kind of thought processes right up front with the acquisition approach and strategy, I think is a key piece to getting at that.
Great questions. Oh, good, another question, because I was going to tell you, we've actually changed the agenda. We're going to close this, have a working lunch, and we're going to solve this right here. Sweet. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Marianne Swenson. I work for a research facility for the Department of the Navy. Going back to a people or process question with regards to integration of intelligence. So twofold question. First, do you feel like the intel community is making the technical intelligence available for both industry and Navy or military to work together? And then second, there's a threat assessment requirement for a program of records to pass your milestone B, C, right, through the JSID process, but not for like rapid prototyping or for the S&T community. So for the S&T community, how do you see integrating intelligence, and is the IC providing enough information out there for you guys to work together?
Well, Christian and Bill, and then the user.
I'm afraid I'm probably going to just do a little bit of punting on this. In general, with all of our warfare communities, to include the growing information warfare community, I feel like we benefit from really robust engagement. And we have a pretty solid understanding of the operational challenges that we're working to address, and the requirements that ultimately will support the technology that will support it. But within the information warfare community, because of the unique nature of the IC, the connecting files are not as robust, and I think as a result, the energy that we're putting in sort of for the general purpose force to develop those capabilities does not have the same benefit of that active dialogue. There's also some parallel paths that the intel community works along that creates some segregation of that science and technology work, and I'm unfortunately not in the best position to assess the health or the strength of the activities on that parallel path. But in terms of the mainstream business that we're doing at the Warfighting Lab and the Office of Naval Research, my experience is we don't have sort of the same level of active engagement, the same level of visibility that we have with the other warfare communities.
Okay, watch this. I get to be a moderator. You don't get to punt. Here's why. So the JSIDS process requires an intel assessment to prove the need for the thing we're going to go spend money on. So, General, when you talked about the operating forces have something they want,
Yes,
how do you prove the need for that thing that you're going to build for the warfighter? What is that intel that gets you to say, yes, this is worth going forward? What is the threat environment that says, yeah, I'm going to go after this and we're going to spend money on it?
Yes, sir. So National Defense Strategy, one of the compelling challenges as identified in the NDS is the return of great power competition. We're very focused inside of DoD and certainly inside of the Department of the Navy on meeting the primary challenges identified by the Secretary in the National Defense Strategy. So every investment, every capability has to measure up against the metrics associated with those most demanding operating environments. So sort of as a general approach, we have a very expansive view into the intel record, and we have a very expansive appreciation for how we think we're going to be challenged in those most demanding environments. And then there is a growing demand or a growing need for operations analysis, modeling and simulation, and emulation support to the resource allocation decisions. No longer a capability-based process, and really a heightened emphasis on threat-informed capability development process that has that strong connecting file and that very strong relationship to the intel community and the intel record. A little bit of a different thing than developing capabilities for the intel community, but the intel community is woven into absolutely everything that we're doing.
Yeah, and I'll build a little bit off of what Kristen talked about. I would say the answer broadly is yes, from my perspective. But as we move to more model-based systems engineering, I think the level and details of some of the threats and the threat models we really need to get to, particularly if we're, as we look at what capabilities we want to add and the effects we want to get, both kinetic and non-kinetic. So in my mind, I think as we move more and more down a model-based systems engineering approach where our designs are in a digital form, being able to bring those threat models and threat data forward in a similar form is going to be very, very important. And I know there's work being done in that area. We're just going to have to continue to evolve that.
And from an F-35 perspective, the IC is very responsive. However, it's a shared responsibility. My simulators and my aircraft, through the mission data file, relies heavily upon the intelligence community for the initial tranche. And then as we get to scale, we've got 360 F-35 air systems flying around the world today. In the next 4 years, that'll be 1,000. We're going from 15 bases and 3 ships to 33 bases and 8 ships in the next 5 years. The proliferation of F-35 engagement and its ability to suck up new intelligence, digest it, and then transmit it back, I see at scale with the intelligence community, with F-35 and other weapon systems that are coming to bear in similar nature, that we got to rethink the way we do non-serial communication and support and do truly distributed support between the intelligence community and our high-end weapon systems as we go forward.
Okay, last question. I'm going to throw it at Bill. Bill, yesterday...
You didn't tell me you were going to do this.
I know. It's an easy one, though. It's easy.
Okay.
Your boss, Secretary Gertz, mentioned a thing called Naval X.
Yes.
And he said ideas are going to come into this Naval X place and they're going to instantly turn into capability. Can you describe how, you're probably the stuckee for Naval X as DAS and R&D. Can you describe how that process is going to work inside the Department of the Navy?
Yeah, so, what we're trying to do, and just to clarify, I don't think he really was looking at Naval X as going to be the innovator. In fact, he specifically said they're going to be the place what I would call facilitates innovation. So the thought being, we got a lot of, part of learning fast is understanding who's already experienced and done some of the things that we're trying to do. Whether it's using 804 contract initiative or a prize challenge or lessons learned from an advanced naval technology exercise, being able to document those, lay those in, put playbooks together so when the next person comes in and says, hey, I want to learn how to, there's a place available, there's, as he called them, Sherpas available to be able to kind of lead the expedition going forward, help them get to where they want to get to, but not do it. The innovation is going to happen, at the program offices, in the labs, in the warfare centers themselves. So as you look forward, that'll be almost like a storefront, be able to come in. Now, in addition to that, it will be a location where we can bring in sprint teams that can come in and work some of these areas where, hey, we need to better understand this requirement. So we're going to get a cross-functional team of warfighters, scientists, and engineers, and come in and do some critical thinking, spend 6 weeks there and solve a problem. Will the people sitting at the Naval X do that? No, but they'll be there to help facilitate and do that guiding. And to me, I think that's the value we're trying to get to. Not redo, high-velocity learning, part of high-velocity learning is not to keep relearning the same thing over and over again. And we have a big enterprise across the Don, and there is a lot of great work that's going on out there. The question is, how do you bring it all together in one place and then scale from that and really get the maximum benefit from everybody involved? So,
Bill, thanks for bringing us home. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for your engagement today. Thanks for your questions. We do have a working lunch, but it's with Admiral Daly and the Chiefs of Services at the other end of the auditorium, so I'll turn it over to Bill to take you there. Thank you.
Well, this was a great discussion. On behalf of the Naval Institute and FC, I want to thank our panel members this morning and present them each with a copy of the latest edition, 3rd edition of Fleet Tactics and Naval Operations, Naval Institute book. by Captain Wayne Hughes and Rear Admiral Bob Guerrier, U.S. Navy retired, and an AFCEA bookmark. So thank you very much. And for audience members, before you head back to the keynote hall, if you would take a minute to go into the West app and just fill out the session survey, so we can get some feedback from you all on how to do this even better next year. Thank you very much.